Welcome, delegates. Welcome to everyone that is in the assembly room as well as joining virtually. We do have, I'm looking to my screen, I do have a screen here. We do have the official registered chiefs and delegates joining virtually as well. So at this point, we do have a plenary session, a very important session, a very timely session, an issue that was added to the agenda yesterday, and this is to seek approval of the First Nations and Assembly of the First Nations Child and Family Services, that's FNCFS, and the Jordan's Principal Compensation Class Action Final Settlement Agreement. So with that, we have three presenters that will be part of this session. We will have Elder Ernie Daniels as part of the presentation. We also have Dr. Cindy Blackstock, the Executive Director, of course, of First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada. As well, we have Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse, who has the portfolio with the Executive Council, the Executive Committee, Manitoba Regional Chief. So at this point, I would like to call upon Elder Ernie Daniels. One of the things I'd like to say as Elder Daniels makes his way up is that this session will be discussing very sensitive and potentially triggering issues. So we ask that Elder Daniels open this particular session in a good way. So we'll ask Elder Daniels to provide an opening prayer to lead our discussions in a good way. So with that, Elder Daniels.
Miigwech, my friend Adam, one of the co-chairs, as well as Weena, and Regional Chief Anton. Miigwech. Good morning to all of you. Bonjour, Hanin, Tanze, Washte. I bring you greetings from our Regional Chief Woodhouse, who will speak later, from Manitoba, as well as my people from my ancestral lands of Treaty 1 people in Manitoba. I'm referred as a knowledge keeper. At one time I was a former chief, also part of Assembly of First Nations. So we did a ceremony this morning, my friends, with the plaintiffs of the class action. They're here with us. We also had our legal team there, our political team, and our negotiators. We had a very good smudging ceremony before we came here. We did a prayer. So with that prayer, I'm going to say here, this prayer talks about our Creator, our land, our people, our children, and those that passed on to the spirit world. So this is what my prayer is all about. And I request the leadership in this room that we treat each other with kindness and gentleness as we talk about this very sensitive issue of child welfare. All of us have been affected. Turtle Island, the genocide that has been placed upon our people, which includes taking our kids away. They try to weaken us, individuals, family, community, by taking our children away. As you are aware, the Pope made an announcement last Friday, doctrine, discovery is no more, which was a path, a blueprint for colonizers to use on our people, including taking our children away. So today's announcement, I believe, will restore dignity to our children, families, and communities. Mi question the kid non gen schnabe. No, nas. Well, me one. Sema ging ubena. Chin endem no ma which me go on to be on me on get naked. Gani dem skribish because makondo dem go nashgrad don't say. Me gnona no mo got demanding madzin. Ni nakoma. Agizuma bagusenima. Quick ni National Vegeminayad. Quick to the Mused, quick. Jizong it mountain ogum. What I be just saying, I be no jug a yima jod. You adopt an organ from our communities. You go just game, I must say, ducking on Jesus, because I'm in the dog, I shouldn't cause it again. The knockama, the gizama, but we say them again. Jimmy Jordan, Janish, and I beg no quick Jimmy no said. Well, I've been nujik, I just the more nongum. I'll suck on again, oh, you mean you was young. Jimmy Jod, Nijanish, Nabig, Knockmug, Gizamug, Boxin Mug, and all. Working, said, no, Nanshnabe. Jenny Missionam, Jenny Missionam, Jenny Missionam. Thank you, Miigwech. Have a good day, my friends.
Miigwech. Nanakoma Miigwech Ndana Hawe Xchiha Ernie Daniels Skagi Pakanunk Hawe Xchen Schnabe. So I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to Elder Ernie Daniels for the prayer to open this particular agenda item. So next, I'd like to call upon Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse, Regional Chief for Manitoba, just to set the context for this session and speak to the emergency resolution and the agenda item that we have before us. So Regional Chief Woodhouse.
Thank you. Well, good morning. We've now concluded on, as of Sunday, we worked all weekend again, and I want to thank our plaintiffs, all of our people, Cindy, our regional chiefs. I know I call Bobby all the time, and you know, Chief TG, all of us, Chief Hare, my fellow regional chiefs, for always helping me every single day when I'd call them. And I know that it's been what, 16-year journey. And I also want to lift up former National Chief Phil Fontaine for starting this with Cindy in the beginning, when you both signed for our people, and for our plaintiffs who are so brave, and some of them are facing backlash for standing up for kids, for standing in court, being so public. And it's not always an easy thing, but it's always been about our kids. People have always been at our people through our children. And this is, again, another broken policy that needs to be changed. And securing $23 billion is now before you, chiefs, for you to decide on this resolution, to make sure that, to signal to our children that harm has been done to them. It doesn't indemnify abuse that they did suffer, physical abuse and all that, but this does signal to them that wrong has been done to them. And I just, you know, I lift each of them up, each of them that are probably triggered through all of this. 300,000 people, their parents, their grandparents, many of our people in each and every one of our communities, in each and every one of our families is affected by this. I want to thank the Algonquin Territory. I see Chief Whiteduck here, and the other chief who welcomed us in a good way yesterday. Thank you for welcoming us to your territory. I'd also like to thank Ernie Daniels, who's been with us, and you know, through the past year, trying to work and finish this compensation piece to bring before our chiefs. It's always been the elders that and our leadership that have come together to get us to this point. And I know in December there was, you know, different resolutions, different ways of doing things, and I'm so proud of each and every one of you for coming together in a good way in December and thinking about our kids, to bring them together so that we had one united resolution. And because of that work is what we have today. I'd also like to lift up my Manitoba Chiefs, who many times, you know, I'm not at home. I'm on the road negotiating, and you know, and I want to thank them for their understanding, for their love, their kindness. I guess a little bit about myself. My name is Cindy Woodhouse. I'm from Manitoba. I'm from Treaty 2 territory. My grandfather had signed Treaty 2 in 1871, and I always hold that. I always thankful on our treaties and our people's rights. But we're pleased to come together today to share with you the revised final settlement agreement to compensate First Nations individuals who experienced Canada's profound discrimination under the First Nations Child and Family Services Program and Jordan's Principle. I want to start by acknowledging our incredible plaintiffs that are here: Carolyn, Richard, Noah, Karen, Ashley, and Melissa, some of whom are with you today. I lift you up for your courage and dedication to this process. I'm also happy to be joined by my friend Cindy Blackstock, the Executive Director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society and a lifelong advocate and champion on the rights of First Nations people. I'll provide, I guess, a little bit of an update. The negotiating teams have been working hard over the past few months to reach a revised agreement that satisfies the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's orders on compensation and pursues fair compensation for the classes dating back to 1991. Together with the Caring Society, we were able to secure an additional $3.3 billion in compensation to address all these areas of concern, bringing the total amount to over $23.3 billion. We are very proud of the accomplishments we have made in this process and firmly believe that this revised agreement is the best possible for our children and families who have been so significantly impacted by Canada's discrimination. We are pleased to provide you with an update on the revised agreement. The revised FSA was shared with Chiefs this weekend. We also have copies available for Chiefs at the distribution table over there. We also have a detailed technical briefing deck available at the AFN's website with more information on the final settlement agreement. I'm gonna do something, because I know that our plaintiffs, you all traveled a long way. I'm gonna give them a few minutes to speak, and then I'll ask Dr. Blackstock to follow thereafter. So Ashley, if you'd like to come up and say a few words briefly, but we're so proud of each and every one of you. Much.
Good, Cindy. Bonjour, Ashley, Indigenous. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Bach. I'm a member of Mishkigogumang First Nation, but I didn't grow up there because I was apprehended from the hospital and placed into foster care immediately. I want to say thank you to Elder Daniels for his prayer, and to the elders yesterday as well for their opening prayers, to the drum for their song, to the Algonquin Nation for hosting us, and especially to Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse and Dr. Cindy Blackstock and all the lawyers and rep plaintiffs who have worked so hard on this over the past 3 years. I'm really, really, really happy and relieved that we've come to an agreement with Canada, with the Caring Society, with the Mushum team, that all the parties are in agreement with. But I also want to take a moment to remember everyone who passed away while in care or while waiting for the services that they were supposed to receive, and for their parents and family members too. And I especially want to remember I especially want to remember Jada from Manitoulin Island. She was in care her whole life, and some of you might be able to find online the fundraiser going around. Her family is trying to establish a bursary in her name for Indigenous youth who are in the system, who are trying to go to school now. My heart is really hurting so much for all the children, youth, and parents and grandparents who aren't here anymore to receive the compensation they deserve and aren't going to be able to benefit from the long-term reform of the Child and Family Services program, which is still ongoing. And it's really not fair that it took 16 years of CHRT complaints and 3 years of class action to get to where we are today. But I'm so grateful for everyone who's been here to support us, and all the chiefs who've supported us, and all the grassroots people too who have been working so hard and advocating so hard. I was speaking with Grand Chief Norman Syllaboy yesterday. He came and approached me after everyone was leaving yesterday evening, and he said, you know, it's not about that settlement money, it's about the healing that money signifies. And I agree. The compensation won't ever be enough to bring justice for the community members who have passed away, or for the childhoods that we lost, but it is a path towards our healing. And I'm hoping that the youth who are eligible for compensation, and also their families and parents too, and some people who are no longer youth as well, they're really adults now, but I hope that they'll be able to use this compensation to take care of themselves and to treat themselves and love themselves and heal themselves by making sure there's a roof over their heads, of spending time in their home communities and territories, getting their education, going to therapy, and even doing stuff like traveling around the world and seeing what's out there, because they deserve it. They've been through so much. So miigwech everyone for being here today, and yeah, miigwech as well to all the regional chiefs who are here too. Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you.
Karen, I'll ask Karen, one of our next plaintiff, to please come up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Ostchov. I'm a rep plaintiff for the removed child class. I'm also a lawyer on this file. I'm also a 60 scoop survivor. I didn't prepare any notes, but you know, I want to speak from the heart. This case has been hard on all of us. It's been a really hard journey to step up for our people. I answer the calls on the class action line, so I speak to our survivors every day. The stories are here. I just feel so much for our people, you know. Yeah, and I just have their stories in my mind, you know. And in December, it was really hard because we had entered into the final settlement agreement, and then there was, you know, fighting about it, and that was 4 months ago. And at that time, when all that stuff was going on, I felt suicidal, which I don't know if I'm supposed to say that because I'm a lawyer, you know, I'm not supposed to say that, but that's true. Being a survivor of the child welfare system, it's kind of like walking in society as a ghost. It always haunts you. It really hurts your heart and messes with your mental health. And for the longest time, I thought I was the only one. Because I'm a 60 scoop survivor, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only Native kid that grew up in this white family and didn't understand what was going on. But I always felt so empty and lost, you know. And I know I've shared this before, but you know, when I was in the foster care system in Saskatchewan and I was having troubles in my teenage years, I was called really bad names and they treated me really poorly, and I was a small little girl. Imagine being 11 years old and being on the street in Saskatoon. I have no idea how I made it. I don't know how I made it, but when I started university in Vancouver, of all places, I started going to ceremony, you know, and I know that ceremony is what's kept me alive all these years. And To all the claimants that I talked to and the ones that I haven't talked to, you're not alone. Those feelings that you have, the pain and sorrow that you carry, you're not alone. I know for myself, I've lived most of my life shut down, you know, and even I used school kind of as a shield and work to not have to feel these, and this case has made me feel things and be honest about what it's like to be a survivor of the child welfare system. And I met somebody yesterday outside the hotel and we were talking, and she said, I told her what happened, well, me and my boss did, and she's like, you made it. I did make it. But as Ashley said, a lot of our people didn't make it. A friend of mine, a really, really close friend of mine, who's a 60 Scoop survivor, she lost her brother. We've lost our siblings to suicide as well. So I'm speaking to the people that are feeling hopeless. We do hope that the settlement can help heal your heart and help you on your path. And again, as I say, you're not alone. And you can reach out to us. You can call me on the class council line. It's on our website. And I'd be happy to speak to you. So again, I just want to tell our survivors that we love you and I love you. Miigwech.
Thank you. Very moving. And Melissa, if I can call you up, please. And then Carolyn thereafter, and before Dr. Blackstock.
Just like my sister, I didn't prepare any speaking notes. My name is Melissa Walterson. I'm a plaintiff. I represent the family class of the removed children for this class action. I am thankful to the legal team for everything that you've done for the class action, and I'm thankful to all the representatives that stand beside me. I'm kind of tippy-toeing around because I've received a lot of backlash from people over the last 3 years. So I just want to say thank you to the chiefs for all of your support throughout the last number of years, and I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Carolyn, can you come up? Carolyn Buffalo.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Buffalo. My Cree name is Askigayat, and I am from Musquecheese in Treaty 6 territory, and I'm representing the families in this lawsuit, the families of Jordan's principal. My son Noah, he's now 21, but he has severe cerebral palsy, and he is representing the Jordan's principal children. My husband, Richard Jackson, is also representing Jordan's principal families. Noah and Rick couldn't be here, but I managed to be able to come here on short notice. So ever since Noah, since we discovered that he had cerebral palsy, we've had so many issues and problems, and we've had doors slammed in our faces, we've had obstacles put in our way just for basic services, and that's all we ever wanted was what other people were receiving, people off reserve. And I used to be chief, so I'm a recovering politician, and even when I was chief and I was a public school trustee, I was in a position, and I was also Vice Chief of Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations, yet even with all the power I had due to those positions, and because I'm a lawyer, so I have advocacy skills, even though I had all of that, I still was denied services on a regular basis. And I always, in my mind, was, what about all of those families that can't speak for their children? Because if you have a handicapped child and you live on reserve, you have 3 choices. One is you move. So you have to move your child away from their community, away from their people, their language, their culture, their relatives, their school even. Your other choice is to put your child in care. So you, as a parent, with your children in care, like, the Creator loans us our children, but when the system takes your child away from you, or you have to put your child in the system, you're not able to fulfill that spiritual obligation that the Creator has given you. And that's what's happened to so many of our families. And so you on reserve get nothing, but you put your child in care, the foster family gets paid and they get everything. Where is the justice in that? So to me, this system where our children are denied basic things that their doctors and their medical professionals say they need. When you're told no, this is another form of forced removal of our children from our communities. So we've had to fight for everything, and that's your third option, is you stay and fight. So Noah's used to fighting. We're used to fighting. I'm not going to get into all the stories of all of the denials. That would take way too long. But I will say we're used to it, and we stood our ground and said, why should we move where I live on my family, I live on our land, close to where my grandparents did their ceremonies and where they lived off the land, and why should I have to move to get services? They should come to us. No family should be put in those positions. No family should have to fight. Even me, with all of the power and skills I had, I couldn't get everything. And I always had in my mind, what about those families and children who can't advocate? All those vulnerable children. We've had to have those difficult conversations. That's how hard it is. But many of you have heard me say this before, but when we were asked if we would be representative plaintiffs, as a family, we discussed it, and we asked Noah, because we don't do anything without his consent. So we asked him, like, do you want to fight? Do you want to keep on fighting? But this time it's going to be for other kids. And his response right away was, Skoden. I'm so proud of him. He has so much courage, willing to stand up and fight for other kids. Being a representative plaintiff has been really difficult. It's a hard burden to carry. And, you know, even as representative plaintiffs, we've been attacked. for doing the work we're doing. I'm also Noah's guardian plaintiff in this lawsuit. So I've had to stand up and say, stop attacking us. Because Noah's vulnerable and he's doing this because the discrimination has to stop. Because it's still going on. And we need to fix the system. So the long-term reform piece is really, really important. But we need to get going. The children and families have waited long enough. Enough's enough. And we've lost so many of them already. I just am so grateful to Regional Chief Woodhouse for all her hard work and advocacy. I'm grateful to the AFN and the National Executive, and really grateful to our legal team and to everybody who supported us. I'm really, really grateful to the Creator for giving me my son and giving me this important work to do. And I really hope that this resolution goes forward and we can get on with the work of fixing the system and of getting compensation to all of those who need it. Hi, Gakyutam Scott now.
Thank you to our plaintiffs. I know that that's difficult to hear, but those are the true stories of our people. Many of our families go through this every single day, and our hearts are with our families. I'd like to now welcome to the podium Dr. Cindy Blackstock. I want to lift you up and I want to thank you for your work. And I'd like to open the floor up to you. Thank you.
So good morning. It's a real honor to be here on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory. Thank you, National Chief, Regional Chiefs, and most of all to the children and the families themselves. Children are the keepers of the possible. They are the sacred, and when we look into their eyes, they help us do more than what we thought would be possible of ourselves. To give more than maybe we thought we were capable of standing stronger than maybe we thought was possible, of standing in the winds of discrimination, even if we're scared, because we want the children to not have to stand there alone. We're so grateful to the elders and to the veterans who teach the children and safeguard them. But it is within each one of those children that the possible exists, and that's why this is so important. I want to thank all of you for being here and the representative plaintiffs. I know your journey has not been easy, but most of the sacred things aren't. And so I am really pleased to be able to return to you and to thank you for your direction sheets in December that said that we are not going to leave any children behind in this compensation deal for the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and the final settlement agreement. That yes and is possible, and yes and was achieved with this particular deal. I'll be going through the metrics of it in a moment, but I do want to thank all of the regional chiefs, Regional Chief Cameron, National Chief, Regional Chief Woodhouse. Thank you for believing in us, and most important, believing in your kids enough to make sure that we got the right deal at the right time for kids. And we have long-term reform to still figure out, because to really achieve justice for these children means that Canada does not hurt another generation of First Nations children, young people and their families. That's what the residential school survivors asked of us. It's what the 60 Scoop survivors asked of us. It's what these survivors have asked of us. and we have to deliver on long-term reform, and we are going to get that right. And we'll be back to deliver that to you in the next coming months. But there's a plan ahead, and we're going to achieve it, and we're going to get there, because our kids are worth it. Thank you.
Miigwech, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Cindy Blackstock for the quick presentation and the background on the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal case. But also, it's very important to acknowledge the representative plaintiffs that took the opportunity and had the strength and the courage to come up and speak. So again, I ask you to give them a hand. Miigwech. So with that, we have Regional Chief. She's going to do a presentation. Okay. So with that, we do have Regional Chief Woodhouse, but also I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Cindy Blackstock to make a presentation. Regional Chief Woodhouse will be back and go through some of the important work that has been done and make the actual presentation. Just a reminder, there was reference to a resolution that one of the representative plaintiffs is asking you to support and endorse. We do have an emergency resolution that we will be dealing with immediately after this presentation. So with that, I turn it back to Dr. Cindy Blackstock.
Thank you, and I do want to recognize my legal counsel, Sarah Clark and David Taylor in the back, who have done an amazing job and often free of charge for the kids, so thank you to them. It means that a child has lost their childhood, and that could have been prevented. And I want to see this being the very last compensation payment for children that Canada ever makes, because I'd never want to see our kids victimized again. This has got to be it. So with your collective efforts and those who came before, we've been able to secure over 2 million Jordan's principal services. So from the story of Noah, much has happened to change that, and now the answer for many families is yes, but we have more work to do there. We've had an increase in child and family services of $1.5 billion, most of that in prevention services. The first time in the history of the country that we've actually had investments to keep families together instead of tearing them apart. And that is a real credit to people out there on the ground, and I just want to recognize them, the frontline people who are out there every day in the community making this stuff happen and keeping families together and helping them recover from their trauma. And I hope that you would join me in a round of applause for them. In December, there was an announcement of a $20 billion deal. We've been able to improve on that by $3.34 billion, and that is to mostly remedy some of the areas where the tribunal thought we could do better. We have long-term reform, but keep in mind it's 19.08 over 5 years. We still don't know what's happening in year 6, and we got more work to do. But we believe that in going and talking to your experts and your nations, coming back with an evidence-informed solution that you get to see by your technicians and your leadership understands, we're going to get there. So that is the major point work in front of us. So here's your resolution from December. I want to thank the leadership for that clear direction. I think that was very, very helpful to everyone. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but we all know that what the leadership said is, yes, make sure that people legally entitled to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal compensation receive theirs, and also let's ensure justice for those covered by the final settlement agreement. So here's the first group that where things were, there was a concern and how it's been remedied. It's with children who were actually moved during a child welfare placement, but to say a neighbor off reserve. Now, this might sound like kind of it'd be a small group, but it's actually the most frequent type of placement that happens in child welfare, because we're always looking for different things other than putting kids in foster care. So the remedy for that is there's now been an additional $520 million to make sure those children receive their compensation, and also for their parents and grandchildren, an additional $702 million. Now, what I'm presenting to you here are round-up figures, so you might find a little bit small differences in the final settlement agreement. And I also just really want to acknowledge that we calculated these numbers on the best available information, leadership. So, you know, we can't be 100% sure, but we're feeling as best as we can that these amounts will be sufficient to ensure the rights of these children. The other is the entitlements of parents who had multiple children removed. That has now been remedied under this agreement. So parents who have had multiple children removed, we have an additional $477 million to compensate those parents. We had the estates of parents, children's estates were always included in the previous final settlement agreement, but parental estates were not. Now we've got an additional $56 million to compensate the estates. And I just want to take a moment and do as Ashley did and really recognize all the young people in care who passed away and didn't see this day of justice. And also a lot of the parents who passed away not seeing this day of justice, including the amazing Marina Beadle, who Carolyn and I have both had the pleasure of interacting with, and who set the first legal precedent for Jordan's Principle back in 2012. And she's from Pictou Landing First Nations. So thank you, Marina. The money for the parents' estates, by the way, will be distributed. Our proposal is it'll be distributed to the children of that parent. So it will not go to the particular estate so that it's open to creditors, but it will go to the children of that parent. Ensuring compensation for Jordan's Principle children and families. In the previous final settlement agreement, it was not clear that folks under the CHRT who are already legally entitled to 40 would get those amounts. We've now redone the wording in the final settlement agreement that provides greater assurances that those persons who are already legally entitled to $40,000 will receive that as the floor for Jordan's Principle, for the children, and for the families. And that is in honor of Jordan River Anderson and his entire family. We also have interest. So the tribunal ordered not only $40,000, but interest payable to those children and caregivers and families who are entitled to compensation. That was not previously spoken to in the previous final settlement agreement. It's now been addressed with an additional $1 billion to go to the interest payments. So many of your children and young people will be receiving $40,000 plus because they've been waiting a long time and they shouldn't be penalized for that. I should just remind leadership that children themselves will not be receiving compensation as children. They will have to, it will be placed in trust until they reach the age of majority. And then another positive thing that we were able to achieve is all of us in this room, and I've heard from leadership and community members across the nation, have been concerned about very high needs Jordan's Principle children who turn the age of majority, who are entitled to compensation. We were already able to get post-majority services for children in care, but for Jordan's Principle children, there wasn't anything available. So we've received another $90 million to provide supports to those young people. It's not going to be enough to cover all of their supports, but we're hoping it's a beginning and that it recognizes the injustices that these children have faced. And I look forward to a day where the Jordan's Principle runs throughout the entire life course and isn't cut off at 19. So where is the next step? Well, it's your decision. You're the rights holders. You're going to make the decision about whether or not this is right for your children and families for compensation. That's the first and most important step. After that, we would go to the tribunal on a consent motion. And we feel fairly confident that with these fixes, that the tribunal will feel comfortable and will hopefully approve the settlement. And then off to the federal court. And the other piece is that the Assembly of First Nations in Canada will drop their appeals of the compensation orders which are currently active, so that we can put this to bed. So how can you help? Well, of course, you got the most important role, making sure those supports are available in the communities. Community education is available to your children and families so they know what's entitled here, and also what the limits are. This won't deal with kids who are removed off reserve. There's another class action to deal with that. So I think it's important that we're just really honest with people about what it will and will not do. Watch out, we're having at the Caring Society actually an educational session on class actions that's free of charge on the 18th. So if you have as many questions about them as I do, you can attend that class action seminar. This is the most important part. I really think so. It's making good on the promise to end the discrimination and make sure it never happens again. So with that, I just want to thank you all again. Thank you, National Chief. Thank you, Regional Chief Woodhouse, Regional Chief Cameron, all the Regional Chiefs, Regional Chief TG, Gisan Picard, all the Regional Chief Hare, any others that I've missed. Thank you so much, and thank you. And I hope that we can support this as a day of justice for kids. But the real justice comes when we put an end to Canada's discrimination. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Blackstock, and thank you for your patience with us. I guess I'll just move now. There is an emergency resolution in closing before you today to seek your support of the final settlement agreement on compensation. First Nations leadership and involvement in this process is what sets this agreement apart from other compensation processes. As I said earlier, I wholeheartedly believe that this is the best possible agreement to compensate our children and our families. We are closer than ever to turning to the next chapter on compensation, and I thank you for your continued support. We take these next steps in ensuring that these harmed by Canada's discrimination receive what they are owed. I guess just next steps, after chiefs have provided their acceptance, if you do, of this FSA, we will take the agreement to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal for approval this spring, 2023. So I ask our lawyers to, I think probably within a month. I know it's a tight timeline, but we'd like to get that in if you approve today. Once the CHRT has endorsed this agreement, it will then be taken to the Federal Court of Canada for approval in late spring or early summer of 2023, this summer. And once all of these approvals have been granted, the claims process will begin in late 2023 or early 2024, and funds will start to flow shortly thereafter. In closing, this process has been decades in the making. And I want to thank and lift up the important work of everyone, each and every one of you. And I'd also like to acknowledge the AFN's negotiating team, Stephanie Wellman, Diane Corbet, Stuart Watke, all of our staff at the AFN National Chief, my colleagues, the regional chiefs. I want to thank you for your work in seeing this through. And just lastly, I also want to acknowledge our representative plaintiffs again, Carolyn Buffalo, Noah Buffalo Jackson, Richard Jackson, Karen, Melissa Walterson, and Ashley Bach for their courage and resilience in acting on behalf of children and families who have experienced Canada's discrimination. Your dedication is truly admirable, and I commend you for being part of this process. So, Kichimi Gwech, thank you. Thanks, Chiefs.
Thank you again for the presentation, Regional Chief Woodhouse, Dr. Cindy Blackstock, as well as the representative plaintiffs. Also a big thank you to Elder Ernie Daniels for participating in the presentation. At this point, we have a draft resolution dealing with the specific matter. And just to let you know, delegates, chiefs and proxies that are in the room, of course, this is emergency draft resolution number 2, 2023. Of course, the resolution was not in your packages. It is not in your kits, but the resolution has been distributed. Because it is not in your kits, normally we would just read the operative clause and not read the preamble, but I will read the resolution into the record in its entirety. So we will have the resolution up on the screen. The resolution is titled, again, it's draft resolution number, emergency draft resolution number 2, 2023. It is titled Revised Final Settlement Agreement on Compensation for First Nations Children and Families. It is moved by Ogumakwe Linda Debasige, who I need to confirm is present in the room. Ogumakwe Linda Debasige is present. Thank you very much. If you can please stand. Oh, sorry, over here. Thank you. If you can please stand by. I believe I've just been notified by the resolutions team that the seconder is Chief Derek Nepanak. Chief Derek Nepanak is also present in the room. Please stand by. Thank you. So the resolution, I will go through the entire resolution. Up on the screen, we do have the operative clause, but I, again, for the record, will read the resolution in its entirety. It reads, whereas A, the First Nations and Assembly honor all children, youth and families, those with us and those lost, who experienced egregious harms by Canada and its colonial structures, the impacts of which continues to be felt today. We dedicate ourselves to ensuring justice for all affected children, youth and families. B, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the UN Declaration, states 1, Article 2, Indigenous peoples and individuals are free and equal to all other peoples and individuals and have the right to be free from any kind of discrimination in the exercise of their rights, in particular that based on their Indigenous origin or identity. Article 7.2, Indigenous peoples have the collective right to live in freedom, peace and security as distinct peoples and shall not be subjected to any act of genocide or any other act of violence, including forcibly removing children of the group to another group. 3, Article 22.2 states shall take measures in conjunction with Indigenous peoples to ensure that Indigenous women and children enjoy the full protection and guarantees against all forms of violence and discrimination. 4, Article 40, Indigenous peoples have the right to access to prompt decision through just and fair procedures for the resolution of conflicts and disputes with states or other parties, as well as to effective remedies for all infringements of their individual and collective rights. Such a decision shall give due consideration to the customs, traditions, rules, and legal systems of the Indigenous peoples concerned and international human rights. C, the First Nations and Assembly commend the representative plaintiffs for their strength and resilience in pursuing the class action against Canada's discrimination under the First Nations Child and Family Services, FNCFS, program and the improper implementation of Jordan's Principle, seeking fair and equitable compensation for individuals impacted by this profound discrimination. D, in 2022, Canada and the Assembly of First Nations, AFN, sought the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's, CHRT, approval of the $20 billion Final Settlement Agreement, FSA, on compensation. On October 24, 2022, the CHRT issued a letter decision confirming that the FSA on compensation substantially but not fully satisfied its orders on compensation. The CHRT provided its full reasons on December 20th, 2022. That's 2022 CHRT 41. E, the First Nations and Assembly mandated the AFN by way of Resolution 2022 Final Settlement Agreement on Compensation for First Nations Children and Families to, among other items, 1, support compensation for those entitled under FSA and those entitled to $40,000 plus interest under the CHRT compensation orders. 2, direct the AFN to return to the First Nations and Assembly to provide regular progress reports and seek direction on implementation issues. And 3, expressed support for the representative plaintiffs and all victims and survivors of Canada's discrimination and sought to ensure that compensation would be paid as quickly as possible. F, the representative plaintiffs, youth in care and formerly in care, and those with lived experience in other class actions have expressed that supports for class members are imperative to their well-being, including mental wellness supports, financial literacy, and supports for youth past the age of majority, including for high needs Jordan's principal recipients. G, Canada, the AFN, Moshone Council, and the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada, Caring Society, thereafter came together to amend the FSA on compensation to address the concerns identified by the CHRT in 2022, CHRT 41. In these negotiations, the AFN advanced the mandates directed by the First Nations in Assembly in Resolution 28, 2022. H, the parties have negotiated a revised final settlement agreement, the revised FSA on compensation, providing over $23 billion in compensation for the survivors and victims of Canada's discrimination, while addressing the issues highlighted by the CHRT in 2022 CHRT 41 and pursuing fair compensation for the classes dating back to 1991. I, the representative plaintiffs, the AFN, and the Caring Society are recommending that the First Nations in Assembly endorse the revised FSA on compensation. J, pending approval of the revised FSA, the AFN will present the revised agreement to the CHRT for approval. Once approved by the CHRT, the revised agreement will then be presented to the Federal Court of Canada for approval to ensure the timely distribution of compensation to the survivors and victims of Canada's discrimination. Therefore, be it resolved that the First Nations in Assembly, 1, fully support the revised final settlement agreement, the revised FSA on compensation in principle, and authorize the Assembly of First Nations AFN negotiators to make the necessary minor edits to complete the revised FSA. Number 2, support the AFN in seeking an order from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, the CHRT, confirming that the revised FSA on compensation fully satisfies its compensation orders. Number 3, direct the AFN upon the endorsement of the revised FSA on compensation by the CHRT to seek approval of revised FSA on compensation by the Federal Court of Canada on an expedited basis. Number 4, call on the Prime Minister of Canada to make a formal and meaningful apology to the representative plaintiffs and the survivors of Canada's discrimination and those who have passed away. Number 5, continue to support the representative plaintiffs and all survivors and victims of Canada's discrimination by ensuring that the compensation is paid and adequate supports are provided as quickly as possible to all those who can be immediately identified, and to continue to work efficiently to ensure that compensation reaches all those who are eligible. Number 6, direct the AFN to return to the First Nations in Assembly to provide regular progress reports on supports, implementation, and the claims process, and seek direction where required. So there is the resolution before you. At this point, I will ask Ogumakwe Debasige if you wish to speak to the resolution. Again, you have up to 5 minutes. Microphone number 1, please.
Miigwech Adam, it's a bit short. I have the honor of moving this resolution. I'd like to acknowledge Chief Patsy Corbier of Ondeck Umnakaning, who did support the resolution in December and who was to support this resolution here today. However, she just lost her husband and has asked that I step in to support her work. And of course, our representative plaintiffs, our negotiators, Regional Chief Woodhouse, Dr. Blackstock, and everybody who has been part of this journey thus far. Some of us may feel that this is not enough. However, this is another step in having Canada address and start to reconcile harms done to our children that has impacted us through generations and generations and generations, and to this day as well. Part of our responsibility as leadership is to carry on the work done by our ancestors, from time immemorial, and to continue to advocate and work towards and strive towards a better future for our children, and to also honor those who we've lost along the way, and to work in their memory and their legacy. So with that, I'm in support of this motion, obviously this resolution, this final settlement, and to support the continued work and efforts that we all are striving towards, and to our negotiators, Dr. Blackstock, Regional Chief Woodhouse, our plaintiffs, and supporting their continued work moving forward. So I also ask my colleagues in this assembly to also provide that support to honor our representative plaintiffs as well and their day-to-day struggles as they've worked towards settlement. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Ogamakwe. And I recognize the microphone is a little bit short. You can move it up if you need. The seconder, Chief Derek Niepenak, you have up to 3 minutes to speak to the resolution.
Miigwech. Bujunichi Ogamakanak Niben Makwa, Dishnakas Makwan Totem. It's my great honor and privilege to be given the opportunity to second this motion today. And as I do, I want to commend the great strength demonstrated by the plaintiffs, standing strong through this very, very difficult and heartbreaking process. The national chiefs, the regional chiefs, and of course, one of my heroes, Dr. Cindy Blackstock, in overcoming the challenges of the earlier version of the settlement agreement and finding a way to bring resolution to this matter to us today. Particularly important that Manitoba has a voice in this conversation, being that we're the epicenter of children's poverty in Canada, and probably the epicenter of children's apprehension in Canada and possibly throughout other colonial states within the British Empire. We have experienced for decades children being apprehended, broken hearts and trails of tears leading to this very important day. And the work is just beginning. It's been mentioned that we have responsibilities within the provinces that we call home to hold provincial governments accountable for those children who've been apprehended and discriminated against off reserve. And that work is going to be ongoing. And I know in Manitoba that work has started. It's been started by the chiefs of Manitoba, but also the agencies, as well as the First Nations Family Advocate Office that was led by Cora Morgan, the first family advocate that we'd ever brought into a responsibility within the political structure. So there's still a lot of work to do, but this is certainly a watershed moment for all of us. I mean, even myself personally, it's hard to determine where the politician starts and where, who I am as an individual begins, because I was also apprehended when I was a baby at the hospital. And certainly these steps we're taking today are about reclamation of family, reclamation of responsibility. And as a cornerstone of any discussion on sovereignty or self-determination, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to take care of our little ones? Are we putting families first, and are we bringing our children home? Because that is certainly what the foundation of any conversation on sovereignty has to begin with. Miigwech, and I look forward to your support on this one.
Miigwech, Chief Derek Niepenak, for speaking to the resolution. So at this point, the floor is open. The order that we will follow again is microphone 1, microphone 2, and then microphone 3, which is actually the Zoom session. Just a note, it is official representatives, official delegates that can speak with the red lanyard. So I see it, microphone number 1. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I just want to confirm that you are a chief because I don't see the red lanyard if you are an official delegate. So again, it is the red lanyards that we will recognize. Just want to confirm at microphone number 1, I don't see a red lanyard. At microphone number 1, if you are a chief, if you can make sure that you do have the red lanyard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to microphone 2, to the Zoom, and then back to microphone number 1. Microphone 2, please, go ahead.
Chief Don Miracle, Mohawks, the Bay of Quinte. We can't lose sight of the shortage of housing. Quite often people that are in the child welfare system, like if they're on mother's allowance, they exist on very meager incomes to support their families. There's a serious lack of affordable housing, and if that's not addressed, Canada will fail because more children will be taken into care because they don't have housing on and off the reserve. And so let's not lose sight of that need. I know there's $2 billion, I understand, in this settlement that deals with housing. The money needs to roll out on an urgent basis because the housing is needed yesterday. So I hope that we can provide strong advocacy for child welfare, particularly those that don't have housing.
Miigwech, Chief Miracle. I will look over to the Zoom. I don't see any hands that are raised, so I will come back to microphone number 1. And again, for the record, state your name, title, and First Nation. Go ahead, microphone number 1. Actually, I'll have the Chief speak first.
Thank you. It's Chief Brendan Mitchell, the Regional Chief, Interim Regional Chief for Newfoundland, and I'm standing with the Grand Chief of the Mi'kmaq people in Canada, Norman Sillaboy, and I'd like for him to speak on our behalf. Thank you.
Grand Chief, go ahead.
I'm permitted to speak. Grand Chief of Mi'kmaq, Traditional Government of Mi'kmaq, 7 districts. I'm speaking on behalf of my nation, where child legislation is always the kids who are never looked after properly while they're in care. And when you talk about, well, I'll have to come back. I'll try to tell my story within 2 minutes. As you know, they destroyed all our teachings, our law books, our traditional medicine, our traditional way of rearing kids. It was done through the Indian Act when they placed it in 1876. And they started putting kids in residential school, forbidding them to speak. And then they did assimilation through doing child welfare of children taken away from their homes, put in non-foster homes. And then this was happening, and we as a nation never had any say of how we do this with our knowledge. We as a nation were always controlled by the Indian Act. The Indian Act controlled our First Nation, so I have to say the settlements that come out of Ottawa are the extension of the Indian Act. And to me, I said it last year, but I didn't say it as a form. Anything that comes out, it's all insurance policy. How much suffering or infliction did you get while you're in care, while you're in residential school, while you're at Indian Day School? It's not about money. My grandfather was Grand Chief of our nation when he said, you're healthy, if you're rich if you're healthy.
15 seconds.
And I know I got 10 seconds. And our nation ain't going to be resolved by money. We have a lot of healing to do. So I'll just say, it's not about money. We need to get our nation healthy and have our treaties and our ways taken control of it again.
Thank you, Grand Chief. Miigwech, thank you. I will now turn it over to microphone number 2. You have up to 3 minutes.
Chief Marcel Head, Shoal Cree Nation, Saskatchewan. I just supported the resolution, but again, you know, when you look at timelines, nobody seems to know what the timelines are on implementation of that compensation. So if somebody, somebody can give us an idea, because this is one of the questions that is going to be raised by our own people back home, is when do we get that 40,000? And, you know, there's interest paid to this too as well. But that's something that our people need to know back home. And something else, that kind of still disturbs me as a chief. I know we use a great deal of legal advice in our forums, but is this institution that we were talking about in the last assembly still looming in the picture here? If that can be directed, we want to make sure that the argument still goes towards the, I guess the settlement has to go directly to the people that were harmed. And there's no piece or any portion of that settlement should go to any institution to administer this. So that's still a concern to me as a chief for my own Cree Nation. And also in terms of 1 minute, okay. In terms of housing, I too have a great deal of people living in Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, and Nipawin. Almost on a weekly basis, I get requests to pay for rent for our people. Why? Because we don't have enough housing in the community. And I know Cindy Blackstock said, that this is the final, lawsuit. But I think that's the next one that's going to come up, is a lawsuit against, shelter for our own people. I see a process, that Canada still has to live up to its obligation under treaty, the treaty right to shelter, and the funding that has to go with it. So that's my concern to Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Miigwech, thank you very much, Chief. So with that, there was a question. I'm going to ask Regional Chief Woodhouse, with the assistance of legal counsel, to respond to the specific question of when can people expect the $40,000. Regional Chief Woodhouse.
Hello.
If we can't get the microphone working, maybe we'll get you to come up to the podium.
Thanks, Chief, for that question. Yeah, so we've got some timeline. So if this is passed today and you do pass it, we've got to go to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. And we need to try and seek their approval. Once they approve it, we're hoping that we can go to the federal court for approval in late spring or early summer of 2023, and shortly thereafter, then once all those approvals are granted, we're hoping that a claims process can be open in late 2023, early 2024, so that funds can flow shortly thereafter. Okay, we're good? Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you. Miigwech, thank you, Regional Chief Woodhouse, for the response. So at this point, I'm going to go to the Zoom session. We do have a hand raised. Chief Cadmus Delorme. If we can have Chief Delorme unmuted, please. Go ahead.
Nanaskaman, good morning to the Assembly and all that did the protocols. I just have a comment. I'm in favor of this and support, but I just have a comment to Jordan's principle. Right now, Jordan's principle and the late Jordan Anderson, if that was to happen today, the Jordan's principle approach is still not fulfilling the spirit of what Jordan Anderson went through. So I just want to make sure that we approach this in the right way in the coming months and years. And secondly, right now, the government of Canada is offloading a lot of the poverty fiduciary obligations and coding it as Jordan's principle. And so I just want to make sure that the spirit of Jordan's principle is going to be honored moving forward, and that it's not managing poverty, but it's making sure that our children have fair and equitable parity in the services that are supposed to be rendered to us through our relationship. So the Naskamun to everybody, thank you very much.
Miigwech, Chief Delorme. So two comments, I think comments that need to be taken back. So I will go now to microphone number 1. Again, for the record, state your name, your First Nation, your title, and you have up to 3 minutes. Microphone 1, please.
Dansei, Chief Desmond Bull of the Louisville Tribe of the Musqueam Nation of Treaty 6. Just in discussion in regards to this compensation, I think we got to try to formulate ways of looking at ways of better compensation, not only financially to the individual, but looking at programs and addressing the real issue of, the accessibility of Jordan Principle. I'm very grateful, that my members access it, but they only access it due to the fact that our membership codes are being interfered with at the provincial and federal government. We as Indigenous or Métis or Inuit people are the only people that have to measure our quantum and lineage through the lineage of who we're related to, which is very difficult for us, because when we try to get our children get into membership, we're hitting barriers that are put in place from the federal government, the provincial government, which is why we have to access the Jordan's Principle funding. So for me, I think when we look at how this compensation should roll out, I think it should include also how can we create education, how can we work with Indigenous nations and tribes to strengthen their membership codes. But for me, I think, let's look beyond the compensation of the individual for financial, but also look at program development, bring awareness, and look at ways of strengthening our communities through infrastructure development. That includes housing. We seem to be using the same formula in regards to compensation at every level, whether it be day scholar, whether it be residential school, whether it be water, whether it be Jordan's Principle. It's the financial compensation to the individual, but it's the community needs that needs to be addressed also, especially addressing the historical significance of why these type of programs are put into place. Thank you.
Miigwech. Thank you, Chief. I'll turn it over to microphone number 2. Go ahead.
Buju, Mishkweb Nindijnikaz, Makwan Nindodem, Anishinaabe and Dow. I'm Gichimigwich for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jeff Kopanis. I'm the elected chief of the Ojibways of Onigaming First Nation. Of course, I'm very supportive of this agreement. Like Derek, Cindy Blackstock is one of my heroes too, and so is Cindy Woodhouse, Miigwech, for doing this work for us. I wanted to echo what we've heard from previous speakers, particularly the Grand Chief from Nova Scotia, from Atlantic Canada, the Mi'kmaq Chief. I really worry that these just become compensation. And I worry that we're leaving our children and families behind at times in terms of this information, in terms of these agreements. I know back home there are dozens of youth and families from the Ojibways of Onigaming watching. I also wanted to thank National Chief Roseanne Archibald for coming to Onigaming to speak with our young people. We're in a state of emergency. We just had 2 young deaths last month. I went to 2 funerals last week. We had a funeral this past weekend. There's another funeral taking place tomorrow. I worry in many ways that we're watching the extinction in real time of my community in the boreal forest, the same thing that's happening in the Amazon. And that's why it's so important that it's not just compensation that goes out, but that, again, we're addressing the issues on the ground. But most importantly, why I wanted to thank Roseanne Archibald, the National Chief, for coming to Onigaming to inspire our young people, is because we brought them here to see you and to see all of the chiefs here. And I wanted to ask all of our young people in the back from Onigaming to please stand. We've got a group of youth here at the back. All of young Onigaming people, please stand. I want our young people to see how beautiful our leaders are, how beautiful our elders are, what we do, what we're doing for them. I want our young people and our families back home to know that they're loved and that they're respected and that their lives are worth it. I want to thank Chief Nepanak for bringing up the issues in Manitoba, but I fear that we're facing just as equal or worse issues back home. And again, I want to send a message to all young people across Canada that we love you, that your lives are worth it, that we want to see you live long, healthy, prosperity lives. That's why we're doing it. That's why I brought all of our youth from the Ojibways of Onigaming back here at the back of the room. And I want to see more of our young people and families at these discussions. Again, I feel like government and even the Assembly of First Nations at times take some of our families and youth for granted. So again, thank you very much, and I appreciate, again, the strong ovation for our young people back home. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Chief. So I'll turn to Zoom. Chief, want to confirm? Chief Whitsom. Can we have Chief Whitsom unmuted, please? Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Chair. SCA, respected ones. Happy to be joining you here from the Quamachin village of the Quetzin Mistimo here in BC. Just wanting to acknowledge all of the speakers on this topic and the presentation that was given. I just wanted to raise a question of support. You know, as I'm so thankful to be able to speak in favor of this motion. I just also additionally wanted to ask all those at AFN and the negotiators if there's room still, or if there's a way to offer some financial advice available for those that are eligible for compensation. Just I know that in the past where we've had these compensatory pieces for people, you know, we know that this can be a real challenge when it comes to being able to reface the challenges that our people's faced that come up when we receive when this compensation comes forward. So just asking for that to look what kind of support can be developed or offered to those that are receiving compensation for, you know, some financial advice or investment advice, just to offer that other layer of supports that can be, you know, make a difference in people's lives in the long run as well when it comes to being able to receive some compensation. So speaking in favor, thankful for all those that have spoken before me and for all of the plaintiffs, the legal team, and all of those that of our peoples across this country that we're all hoping that there's some justice in this and that the healing paths can all emerge for those. But just wanting to really focus on, like, is there something we can do to offer at least some investment or financial advice to those that are compensated, if they're can have that available to them. So thankful to all of those present, all the elders that have spoken. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Chief Whitsom, for your comments. And I'd just like to remind delegates, I've just been reminded, you have a lot of very good comments, commentary and recommendations that the team will take back. Just a reminder that this resolution actually just deals with the immediate compensation. There are a lot of recommendations dealing with long-term reform. So that discussion will be coming back again in the future. To the Chiefs in Assembly. That's dealing with the $19.8 billion to deal with the long-term reform. So thank you for all of those recommendations. Those are all being noted. With that, I'm going to turn to microphone number 1. If we can have microphone number 1, please. Go ahead.
Ani Tikto Dem Megazek Edishnakas, Lori Jaganash Noswin Michisagi Anishinaabe and Dow. First, my first time up here at the mic for this assembly, so I'd like to say Chimigwech and acknowledge the territory that we stand upon, and to the veterans and elders and medicines and the drum yesterday and all the opening ceremonies that have happened so far, and to all the colleagues in the room. I would also like to acknowledge the young people in the room and to say Chimigwech to, I won't say all the names. I know there was many people who have brought this compensation forward to this resolve so far, and I am in support of the resolution. I did have one question, Chair, and you kind of answered it. But I really would like a quick update on the long-term reform, because my understanding is that Canada only had a mandate till the end of March. So I think when you say you'll bring it forward sometime, where does that leave us? Because that funding is also as equally important in my community, and I'm sure other communities, because this is how we are going to help keep our children out of care and out of this system and help those who are there right now. Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, thank you, Chief. So a very important question. I'm going to look to legal counsel Stuart Wetke for a response, just to help clarify the question. So with that, Stuart.
Yes, good morning, chiefs and delegates. A couple of good questions. On the question on financial supports, this agreement, the extra $3 billion, is really updating the old agreement. The original settlement agreement contained provisions with respect to supports that many individuals will be entitled to. Part of that is financial literacy, so we'll have the ability for people to speak to financial managers with respect to possibility of investing their funds or their settlement, and other supports with respect to mental health supports, addiction supports, those types of things will help people through the application process to deal with all the challenges that they've encountered, but also looking at providing that extra supports to help them make good use of their funds. With respect to the long-term reform, as we mentioned in December, the agreement that the Assembly First Nations was able to negotiate with Canada had two components. The compensation, which was valued at that time $20 billion, now it's $23.3 billion, and also the roughly $20 billion with respect to long-term reform. Now, Canada did have a mandate to negotiate, and that mandate did expire on March 31st. We have asked Canada to extend that mandate. Both the Caring Society and the Assembly First Nations developed a joint proposal to move forward. Canada has advised that if we were going to ask for an extension of the mandate and also look at ways of addressing that, and part of that is we're going to be bifurcating Jordan's principle from long-term reform, so some of the timelines will be extended a bit. Canada did advise us that if we did ask for that, it will take roughly about 3 months for them to go back to Cabinet and to seek another mandate from Cabinet. But right now, we do have sort of a soft commitment from them to continue to meet informally until they get a further strong mandate from Cabinet. So that's where we are. We can't say whether or not the discussions will continue at this point. We're expecting that they will, and we do have strong commitment from our federal partners. But until they actually get the official Cabinet mandate, we'll have to wait a little bit. And they said it could take up to 3 months for that. So we will be returning in July for a further update. And if discussions, of course, commence before that, that'll be part of our update as well.
Supplementary.
Hello. So you said it could take up to 3 months, but you just said you put that forward in January. So that's 3 months. What happened?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So we originally put forward, our plan from January was to have an agreement both in compensation and long-term reform by March 31st. So the compensation, of course, we had to go back because of the tribunal ruling. But with respect to long-term reform, that proposal that the AFN and the Caring Society drafted, we were negotiating between ourselves between the time the actual proposal was provided to Canada and the other parties in early March. So we're probably looking at close to June maybe for a decision from the federal government.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to microphone 2. Again, for the record, your name, nation, and title.
Chief Don Miracle, Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. Literacy tends to be an ongoing issue with a lot of people. In the province of Ontario, there's 89,000 cases of Ontario Works, and that poverty affects 119,000 children, according to a report that I got from the Director of Funding Services Indigenous in the Ontario region. With the administration of this, I would imagine there will be an application form that the survivors will have to fill out. Previously, with in the Indian residential school settlement, some of them hired private lawyers, and they charged them excessive fees, and that was in the media too. Some of them actually got called up on the carpet over the excessive fees. So with regard to the administration, is there additional administration money, like to hire a firm like Gowlings or another law firm to provide assistance to the applicants? And if so, how much is that, or does that come out of this $23 billion?
Yes, thank you for that question. And the $23 billion is direct compensation to individuals. So there's going to be administration on top of that, which Canada will be funding outside that compensation, so it's above and beyond the compensation. What we've negotiated in the settlement agreement is that Canada will be paying for what we call navigators. These are individuals that will be tasked with the duty of contacting the applicants and providing them with information. Now, the information that is being used to fill out the application forms is something that the class council have access to. So what's different between this settlement agreement and previous ones is that under our settlement agreement, a lot of the application forms will be pre-filled by the administrator, and the navigators will be contacting the claimants, providing with a copy of their application, speak with them to see if there's any missing information or anything that needs to be clarified in their applications, and then it'll be submitted. So that's the plan that we have. The navigators will be in place for the duration of the agreement. As we mentioned, the agreement itself is fairly expansive. I mean, we're looking at implementation as soon as possible, but it could go up to 20 years. So there will be supports in place for all those individuals for that full duration of that time. So hopefully that answers your question.
Microphone 2.
Question, Stuart. The Children's Aid Societies in Ontario a lot of them don't have good records. Some of them do and some of them don't. So will the applicants have to supply a record from the Children's Aid Society to prove that they were in care, because the records may not exist?
No, they don't. Where we're getting our information from, of course, is Canada. Canada paid for their placements. So when it came to the removed kids, that information is with Canada. They basically paid for the services, so they have a record of who they paid for. So the information that we have, of course, is their names, their status numbers, that type of thing, the dates that they're first put into care. So we'll have that information. When it comes to Jordan's principle, it'll be a bit different. That application will be requiring individuals, parents to fill out the application forms, so they'll be providing the information. But for the removed class, we want to make it as seamless as possible. And as you mentioned in previous settlement agreements, the exorbitant fees that legal counsel have applied, we want to ensure that the forms are in a state where they're useful and that individuals won't need to hire lawyers, that they'll be able to work with the navigators and have their full compensation paid to them directly.
Will be the trustee of the funds for minor children?
Yeah, so as was mentioned by Dr. Blackstock, individuals will not receive compensation until they reach the age of majority. So that money will be invested by the trustee, and it'll be kept in trust. And of course, we're looking at ensuring that capital grows over time. So when they do turn 18 or 19, depending what jurisdiction you're in, their application hopefully will be ready for them or will already be filled out, and they will be entitled to compensation at that time.
Who is the trustee?
The trustee, we haven't appointed one yet, from what I understand. It still has to be done by the court.
Thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Ani, good morning. Miigwachua gajemnido kinuijinda gabajat. We mounted ding nungwa. We the bottoming monda kiniego gimakani minos gimagi the win ona causing bemad sijiknje. Andan matkwe indigenous Rachel Mendoza. Jagnashi knows when Makwado de Minos Wiquem Kong Binjaba. I would just like to thank the Creator for another day, another opportunity for us to come together to discuss the matters that are going to benefit our people. I want to thank the Chiefs in Assembly here today for their presence, both in person and online, for these very worthy discussions. I'd like to also send condolences to Chief Patsy Corbier, who couldn't be with us and who lost her husband recently. Miigwech to Gimal Linda, as well as Chief Nipanak for moving and seconding this motion. I would like to also stand here to give my support on this motion. I do want to use this opportunity as well to highlight 3 points. One is that there's a lot of highlight for children in care, and I think through this resolution there also has to be some attention and recognition for the parents of those children who did not go into care and who struggled and fought the system on their own a lot of the times. I am one of those persons. My son has autism. He's now an adult and he's 25, and it was a constant daily struggle between school, language, speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and the province who had the funding envelope on autism would not support my son because he lived on reserve. His first speech and language appointment was in a elevator in the hospital in order to try and get some speech and language service off reserve that our non-First Nation counterparts didn't ever have to experience. So I would like to also commend all those parents who had the sheer grit, the motivation, belief in the Creator
30 seconds.
Family to help them through. I'd like to also say that there are also issues with those children who have aged out of Jordan's Principle, and we need to develop a system for them, and that the application model of Jordan's Principle also requires attention in a structural and development type of scenario, so that we're not always relying upon an application process. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Just a reminder to speakers, we do have the time running, and I will give you a friendly reminder at 1 minute, and again 30 seconds, or 30 seconds, and again at 10 seconds. Microphone number 2, but before we go there to microphone number 2, just a note online, if you are joining virtually, there is some discussion happening in the chat box. Just to let you know, we are not monitoring the chat box. That is not for the record. So if you wish to speak, you need to hit the raise hand button. So with that, microphone 2.
Hugh Breaker, proxy for Chief Councillor Kenneth Watts. My question is to legal counsel. When the residential school settlement was achieved, many victims felt that lawyers were the big winners in that case. I've read the legal fees section of the agreement. As I understand it, the lawyers who negotiated the settlement will be paid directly by Canada. Will they also be allowed to charge the victims when the victims need legal counsel? The same lawyers who get funding, who get paid for the class action settlement, can they then change the victims when or charge the victims when the victims get or need legal advice? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to legal counsel Stuart Wetke for a response.
Yes, thank you for that question. From what I understand, and I'm not really involved in the fee section since I'm in-house counsel, but from what I understand, the way the agreement is structured is that the class counsel will be getting fees paid directly to Canada, by Canada. From there, the intention is that they would provide services and help claimants out based on the fees that they already have been paid. There may be unique circumstances where there may be other issues. I'm not sure how those fees will be addressed, but from my understanding is that there's a commitment from the council that we have for class action that the fees that be paid by Canada are meant to encompass all the work that they have done and the work that they will be doing.
Question's been called. I do see two chiefs at the microphones. So following those two, and I'm just nothing online, following the next two that are at the microphones, we will close the speakers list. Microphone 1.
Scano, Tsego, good afternoon, everyone. Mark Hill, elected chief, Six Nations, the Grand River. My comments are very quick. Obviously, in support of this as well, I want to congratulate everyone involved in this. However, I don't want this to be misconstrued with still allowing Canada, in a sense, off the hook. Yes, they're coming forward and compensating, and there's been a number of class actions which our community has had a number of issues with. I'm sure many communities, you've heard them here as well, like with residential school, day school, water legislation, languages, the list goes on, and we're learning from these class actions. But I don't, in a sense, also, we need to look to the future and what this means for our kids as well. And I think that's something that Canada needs to constantly be reminded of, as opposed to just saying, well, we dealt with this issue, now let's just leave it there. So I want to make sure that what we're doing in terms of the next steps of the long-term reform is really starting to make that shift within communities and what that reform actually looks like. And I think that's something that we always need to constantly remind Canada of their actions, as opposed to, again, not saying that this is a bad thing or opposed to this, and looking obviously for our members impacted by this, but in the same sense we can't also we got to continue to look to the future as well to this, and I think that's where the key is in terms of the long-term reform and what that shift starts to look like in moving forward for the future of all of our children and families.
Miigwech, Chief Hill. Chief Hill, I'm just looking to you. I know it was a commentary to take into account. Are you asking for an amendment to include that? It sounds like a recurring theme. Or is that just something to take into account?
Just something to take into account, yes.
Miigwech. Microphone 2.
Councillor McKenzie from Larange, Saskatchewan. I'm proxy for Chief Tammy Cook. I just wanted to Nanaskamun, Minagitatamskat now. All of you, thank you, and we support the resolution that's going forward. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about our community of Grandmothers Bay. I've been talking about our high school for many years, and we only go up to grade 9 in our school, in our community, and we've been fighting for a high school. I just don't want our children forgotten, because we're still, the residential schools closed back in '86. I think the last of the residential schools, but our kids still have to move to another community, live in a residential school like a dorm. It's been happening since we started having our school up, and goes up to grade 9. I just don't want my kids forgotten. And I've been advocating for the high school for many years, but the federal government says we don't have any funding for you guys. So I just don't want our children forgotten. In 30 years' time, they're going to come back and sue the government, saying we experienced the residential school era. I just wanted to bring that forward, and
thank you. So with that, question has been called. I'm just going to check Zoom. Nobody has raised their hands. The resolution is before you. I'd like to call, is there any opposition to the resolution? 3 calls just to accommodate online voters. Actually, now that I look to Zoom, we're going to ask to open the polls. The polls are now open online. Any opposition? 3rd call, any opposition? I see none. Any abstentions? 2nd call, any abstentions? Any abstentions? I see none. And let's not forget our sign language. I see none. Resolution is carried. Thank you very much. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Weena for the next, I think we're going into lunch. So.
Thank you very much, Adam, and congratulations to you all for this emergency resolution that has been adopted. And I want to recognize that there's someone at the microphone number 2. Yes, if you can please state your name and nation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Mary Tiji, Mausham Gabu, proxy for my nation, Takla Nation, proxy for Chief John French. Before I start, I would like to call up Sarah Clark, David Taylor, Jessica Saunders, and Raymond Shingus. This day would not be here had it not been for them. We must recognize and give credit where credit is due, so if you would come up, please. Sarah Clark has been a part of the Society, our legal, since she was 22 years old as a social worker. She now has 2 babies of her own and has been relentless and tenacious and patient. And David Taylor, we would not be here without you. I'm going to ask that Jessica Saunders and Raymond Chanus from our society, our board, come up. Raymond is our president. Jessica is our new board member. I would also like to recognize and really honor the late Landon Pearson, who was part of our society for years, Senator Pearson, that just passed away in January. Thank you. I must acknowledge this day all the agency directors, the National Advisory Committee on Child and Family Service Reform. Thank you. We would not be here. We would have never had the information had we not all worked together. Of course, all the regional chiefs, and a special thanks from me for the BC chiefs and my RC, TG, for all the support that you've given us. I need to say that today is a reminder that what can be done when you put children first where they really belong, when one is motivated by justice and fairness and nothing else. This is what happens when we put our hearts and our minds together. I would also like to recommend that in the final settlement agreement that Canada and the parties agree to include in the final settlement agreement, the dedication to go to the children and youth and families in this FSA. It's historic. We need to honor the ones that need to be honored. I would like to also thank in advance is Chairperson Kasalem, and also at the time Kulpi Judy Wilson for supporting the resolution that got us to this day. We were not satisfied with only $20 billion because we left some children out. We are here today, almost $24 billion, because we stood on the side of justice. We stood on the right side of history. Let that be a record to everybody that it was not good enough. We are now confident that we've done everything to the best of our ability to make sure that this day is truly, truly about justice and fairness for all our children. I want to say that there's still work to be done. We have to ensure that discrimination ends and never happens again, that no child shall ever suffer, and that we don't have to go back to court. We said it's a happy day, but Cindy also said it's a sad day, that we are here recognizing all the pains and hurts. This day shows us what we can achieve together, especially when it comes to long-term reform, because the chiefs, you said this in December, that long-term reform is going to be based on good evidence and good information, and it's going to come from the very ones that we're there to serve. It's going to come from our children and our families and communities, and that information will guide our long-term reform, and that's what our children deserve, the best of the best. I would like to say that, of course, we wouldn't be here without our indomitable, our fearless leader, Cindy Blackstock, my Gikson sister. Thank you for always leading us in the right way and never backing down. Like, what is the harm, should say? We're just going to ask Canada, and we're going to keep pushing and pushing until they give it to us. And yes, we're here because of you, my wonderful sister. But this is for all those ones that we've lost. All the ones, our former children in care, that are dying at the opioid crisis because they could not overcome the hurts that they've experienced. This is for you. Before I leave, I want to say that I want to recognize the youth, all the youth that we take care of, the agency directors, the frontline staff. Again, this is for you. We've seen the suffering, and we're trying to work together, and there will be a day, and I want to leave you with the words of a young child in care, a former child in care who is no longer with us. And he said, I dream of a day when I only have to read about the impacts of residential school, and I don't have to live it. It is up to each and every one of us to make sure that dreams becomes a reality, and this day is a start. Masai, thank you.
Miigwech, Tiawank, thank you, merci. On these powerful words by Proxy Mary TG, I want to say congratulations to you all and a big thank you for your dedication and your hard and great work. Thank you. And on this, I'm gonna announce the break for lunch, 1 hour health break, and we'll come back here at 1 p.m. EST, and we will deal right away. I'll have some housekeeping announcement. Messages to communicate, but right after we'll deal with draft resolution number 3. So on that, have a good period of lunch period. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Alors bon dîner, bon lunch à vous.
Have a good lunch and thank you and congratulations for all the work that was accomplished.